As we begin today, it is important to acknowledge that we are filming in Lloydminster on the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan in the heart of Treaty 6 territory. Before the arrival of the explorers and settlers, many First Nations traveled through and thrived in this area, which also includes the homeland of the Métis. I was born here, but I chose to return here as an adult. And now, after unlearning what I was taught in public school in the 1970s and 1980s, and relearning a less whitewashed history of this place, I see this land and its stories through very different eyes. I recognize that the roots of my family on the prairies came at the cost of the First Nations people who were here long before. Their land was taken so that my ancestors could farm and build their lives in this place that became known as Canada. I cannot change the past, but I can try to move forward in a good way by sharing what I've learned about the Indigenous peoples whose teachings are woven into this land and all it encompasses. When I first met Wes Fine in 2014, an internet search led me to an article about him sharing the story of calling badger, or badger call, and the origin of Cree syllabics. Since then, the story has continued to unfold, recently accelerated by Samara Harp, Arden Ogg, and Aaron Fay, who are exploring Cree syllabics and the work of American researcher Leonard Bloomfield. Bloomfield studied languages and linguistics and spent time on the Canadian prairies in 1925, later publishing The Sacred Stories of the Sweetgrass Cree in 1930 and the Plains Cree Texts in 1934. Bloomfield had a third collection that was never published and that has sat in the archive for decades. This collection includes a version of the Badger Call story. A copy of this was presented to Wes at Sweetgrass First Nation in the summer of 2025, bringing the stories home to the community 100 years after they had been collected. It was a copy of this collection that Wes brought to me on this final day of filming and that inspired the topics for the day and the energy in the room. Mr. Finday is sharing stories as he knows and has experienced them, which may differ from those told within other Indigenous communities and settler institutions. Throughout the series, we discuss various plants and traditional healing methods. This is not intended to replace medical advice from trained healthcare providers. Some episodes contain graphic descriptions of events witnessed and experienced by the guest at his time in residential school and at various points throughout his life. They may spark emotions, memories, and questions, so we are asked to listen with open hearts and minds. Viewer discretion is advised. It does feel like a big moment.
It is a big moment.
Well, and sitting with this book in my lap, right?
Absolutely. You know, and this is a journey that we have been on. Like when I think about other societies, and you know, they're looking for the ark, they're looking for the flask, they're looking for, you know, things that played significant roles in their spiritual history of their societies. For us, this is it. You know, we've been on a search, on a journey in search of this material for generations. And you know, in our particular component of the journey, what happened is that those stories came back to us. You know, and we've been sharing them. I've been sharing them with you. You've been sharing stuff with your students. And, you know, that's part of the process unfolding as it should, you know. When I think about what it is that these young people need today, you know, I think about the education they get and how it is all so focused on their intellectual development and skills development. It's physical and intellectual oriented, and not much information about their emotional or spiritual components. And without that, you will forever be on that journey of searching to find the meaning of your life. What is your destiny? What is your purpose? What are the gifts that you have been blessed with that will help you to be able to develop and harness them and take you to that place in time, in this moment in your journey that you have to be, because things are coming, not only with you, but things are coming to meet you. And there's connections, that will be made. And those connections will help us to form more and more of the pieces of the story. When I think about that, the journey we've been on and the things I have talked to you that I dreamed about and had been on a journey about, and all of a sudden, here it is, And everything I expected is there. And it's just such a critical part of the story for me. But it wakes up all these, it awakens the memories of the ancestors, and the spirits say the ancestors are with you. They are supporting you. And you are where you need to be. You just need to get rid of any negativity, get rid of any sense of unworthiness or guilt or any of these things that, rise up and make you think, I'm such a worthless human being. Why am I even being bothered with this? Who am I, to think that I would be worthy of anything? And yet, I've always kept it in my heart and in my soul and in my mind that I'm here for a purpose. I am Creator's child, and I have to try to understand why Creator put me here so that I can get about doing the job that I was created to do here. And to, when they told me to go out and find those ones, and I came out and found you, they're waiting, Doorways will be open. You just have to step through them and you'll meet them. And that's what, my life has become, is walking through doorways and connecting with people who are waiting by those doorways, looking for what will help them pass interdimensionally through creation, different timelines. And right now it's incredibly important. They keep coming every night and saying, we're watching, we're here, we've arrived. And we're your ancestors, those spirits said. You have been through millions of lifetimes. As a child of Creator, you have inhabited many different bodies on many different planets. And each of those was a lesson. And when the earth was being created, they said, and you volunteered to come into this time and place, although it would be heavy and difficult. And Creator accepted your offering and put you down here. It's amazing. It is such an amazing experience. When I think about it, I just think about it. I don't try to understand it, because that will come later in the remembering.
Wes starts reading from the section entitled The Cree Syllabary. It begins, "The true word of God is that which is written here. At one time he decided to instruct his child the Cree because he looked upon him with pity. He called one of them to him to teach him the use of writing. The story of the death and resurrection of Badger Call follows, a story that, until now, I have only heard in its oral form from Mr. Fineday. Wes continues reading from here.
And when this guy died, you know, he told him, I wish to give you divine understanding. I called you, and because I wish to tell you what you are to do on the earth, you who dwell on the earth. And he said, do you think I am in my body? Yes, he answered him. And you have no body. Touch your body, he told him. He touched his body, but his hand found nothing. So he knew with certainty that that which he thought he had as his body, it was nothing else other than his soul.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful.
Then he proceeded to summon his servants, the angels. The place in the center of which they sat was round, and there was a table. I have told you this one. You see? Oh, that's just sending chills through my whole body. I've been here.
Yeah.
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 The place in the center of which they sat was round, and there was a table for writing between them as they sat, in the middle of which lay a written scroll, and there sat those angels upon the paper. Then gradually he ceased to see him, and at last, at the end, he sat there alone. Even as though a thick mist had formed, it was for a while. As soon as he rose to his feet, it grew bright. Then all those angels rose to their feet. Then he came and gave me this writing, he said. The same object of doctrine which the Cree was given by divine power, I here shall write down. May it gain in firmness, this writing which God willed, and may it endure in the form in which God willed it to be made. The object of this doctrine, Cree's gift of divine origin, is only in this form. God did not set down any more than this. Now I shall tell again of what God said to Mr. Nuskawil, all that which is happening now, all that he set forth, that the white men were to be many over this land, and all the things that they actually do. And God decreed that the language of the Cree was to go on through time. May we truly see in every way all the things which are his commandment. This too God told him, that the Christian priests would arrive here, but he forbade that the Cree should practice Christianity. It is not to you that I have given it, spoke our Father. Otherwise, I have created you and set you down. Only this will you do in the way of religion. The sun dance, the medicine lodge, and the smoke lodge. For this reason I count alike all forms of religion, I count them as one. Thus I have given you 4 religions with which to ensure your life from generation to generation and to worship. And the one that's not named there is your own personal ability to communicate with Creator, which is inherent in every human. And which we have to try to dig out by removing all of the lies you have been told to construct this reality that has been created, which is not a reality that will take you far emotionally or spiritually. Yeah, it will always leave you wanting.
But that's that personal connection with Creator.
That's right. It's already in you. You are Creator. Creator is already in you. And you just have to clear away all the debris so that you can reach out and connect with Creator and elevate the level of your experience into a spiritual one. And what happens when you do that is that you transform your body into a totally different timeline. The old one is still here, and you have memories of it, but you're moved into a different timeline with totally different concerns, I will say. Yeah, I mean, the worries you had will not go with you. Yeah.
But this is so contradictory to the work of the missionaries and organized religion that says, hey, let me interpret the word of God for you.
Right.
And you can have a relationship to God in this space through me.
That's right. Yeah, because you're not worthy.
Yeah.
Is the, the foundational teaching in that. You need me to tell God what you need,
Right.
and our old teachings say, you are part of God. You are connected to God. Clear away all the garbage, all the debris, all the misinformation, all of the things that have been placed on your path to distract you, so you can see that connection. Yeah.
But I mean, what's written here is that the Cree will continue to have their own relationship. And yet, what unfolded historically was the exact opposite.
Yeah, because a lot of those people were, when they first saw the priests, they thought because of our own medicine, people were incredibly powerful and respected.
Right.
These were the spirit travelers. These were the spiritually connected people. And then they sent these black robes across, and they came with their, messengers saying, they're on the way. These are our spiritual people. And so indigenous people assume they must be really powerful if they're spiritual people, if they're anything like our people.
Right. Right.
They did not understand that their connection to spirituality was through religion, not through understanding. And it was politically and socially rooted for control, for control for a group or individual, to be able to profit off your life and your energy, where, in the old way, I mean, you have gifts, absolutely, put them to work and bring them into the community. And it's like the Medewe, when, there's that ceremony where everyone brings their medicines and puts them on a center, and they all get chopped up and mixed and put into a large bowl, and then all the members of the Medewe are given a portion of that. And because of that, they cannot use medicine against each other. Right. It's also a social control mechanism, you see. Yeah. They cannot be testing each other's power.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because that can be an incredibly dangerous exercise if you think you're powerful and you're not. A fast way to nowhere.
Yeah, so the black robes would have been held in high esteem with the assumption that they're working at the same level as our
Absolutely.
medicine people.
Yeah.
So, wow, we could work together. We could help each other. We could share.
But then these black robes came along and they told the people, you guys are stupid. You worship trees. You worship the sun. You worship, all kinds of things. And you imbue everything with a soul.
Right.
What's that about? And it's just, for us, these people can't see, And people at that level, you cannot educate. So just as long as you don't meddle in too many things, just let them be, Accordingly, the Cree, when the Christian priests arrived and they saw him, thought him possessed of great spiritual power. Naturally, since of old they knew God, This is why they thought the priest had great spiritual power, because at once he discoursed of God. Never in all the hither course of time had the Cree been evil men. Therefore, when the Christian priest addressed the Indians and continued to make God the subject of his discourse, the Cree at once understood, naturally, since from the beginning of time they had known God.
Or creator.
And because of that, then they all got baptized, because they thought these priests were great spiritual people who had a very intimate connection with Creator, and so we should,
But throughout the text, the word God is used, not creator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in Cree, I mean, Creator is an English term. Mamo Tauimao, the Father of all, Kisemanto, kind and loving Creator Spirit,
Right.
and there's all of these terms that are, I mean, they're interchangeable, but to do with the same creation energy, and part of that creation energy is feminine, and that's the part that's been under attack. They tried to wipe the feminine and keep only the masculine as a form of social control. Yeah, but now that feminine is demanding her place back in the circle. And so you will see women rising. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think on the Cree dictionary, I Googled creator, and it comes up with several different terms.
But, I looked at this and I thought, oh my God. And then I read it again. Oh, yeah. They laid down the basics. They never went into too much detail, but that's what I would have. I would have set this out as a teaser. You want to hear more? Start looking. It's here,
But part of this too was, thank you, that idea that, because we've talked about Fine Day telling stories to Mandelbaum, but he didn't give him the whole story.
No. And that's, a traditional teaching method and style.
Right.
You tell people stories and you watch them. You gauge how much are they comfortable with, what's challenging for them, and what level are they unable to handle just because of their inexperience and their lack of stories, and just give them what they can handle and keep putting more and more of the story into the equation, and they'll get to get more and more comfortable with it, and then it becomes their own. Yeah.
And Bloomfield just spent one summer. Is that correct?
Yeah, 1924 and 25 was when he was here. And he was on leave from, I think, Chicago. But all of this information is on that, a lot of this information, if you download Arden's presentation, these researchers are quite amazing. I mean, Aaron dug these up. Arden's furthering the process, and so is Samara. And they've all, I'm the connecting. They're the ones that came to find me, and we hear something.
But what amazes me is that they had been working with these stories, but had never been to Sweetgrass.
Yeah.
And
never.
Yeah. So it's putting them, I think, into context. And I think culture camp certainly did part of that, being on the land. And then these stories about Chief Sweetgrass and all of this kind of rising and circling and, coming together.
Mm-hmm. Giving it context.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes understanding a whole lot easier when you give it context rather than just simply uttering a word and, that might have the potential to be used in any number of contexts, positive or negative.
So I'm thinking, would Bloomfield have gone to Sweetgrass because Mandelbaum had been there before and paved the way? Like, because why weren't they going to other
Bloomfield
reserves?
was there first
Bloomfield was
in
there first?
1925. Mandelbaum showed up in 1935.
35. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I had it opposite in my head. Okay. So would Mandelbaum have gone maybe because he had heard Bloomfield had been there? I wonder.
I wonder, yeah. Yeah.
Like we hear there's some great storytellers out at Sweetgrass in the middle of Saskatchewan. Right? Like to imagine how all of that came together 100 years ago. They weren't texting each other.
Yeah.
They weren't phoning. Right?
And it was the professionals who had access to opportunities like that.
But would they have just shown up? Like,
well, they would have arranged it through Indian Affairs, and Indian Affairs then would have told the chief, and there's a guy coming to Sweetgrass, and he wants to talk to people. Can you arrange that?
Right. I wonder if they would have been told to bring cloth and tobacco.
No.
No.
They would have been told that by the Indians once they started to ask questions that required protocol.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know if they ever got that far. Maybe that's why these stories are so sparse. Like they gave them a taste.
Yeah.
But they didn't give them the meat.
Right.
Yeah. They gave them a little taste of the broth. And yeah.
But it's just, it's kind of hard to wrap my head around all the logistics of that coming together, but also why Sweetgrass. And I assume, Fine Day was part of this as a great storyteller.
And Sweetgrass was one of the original principal chiefs, peace chiefs of the Cree. It was him and Big Bear.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were the ones that were authorized to make treaties and sign treaties because they were the principal chiefs, and others couldn't negotiate because they didn't have the authority. But the government people came and they told some of the headmen of the old chiefs, well, if you can get 12 lodges to follow you, we'll make you a chief and sign a treaty with you. That's how Red Pheasant and, some of these other chiefs got to be chiefs. The government made them chiefs. And that's where the term changed in Cree from Okimau to Okimahkan, a created chief. Not a legitimate chief. Okimahkan, a make-believe chief, a pretend chief. That's Okimahkan. And that's what the leaders are called today, the chiefs. Okimahkan. Okimau was a leader. Yeah. Okimahkan was an imitation or a copy of a leader.
And then by doing that, they split up the people. So if we can divide and conquer.
That's right.
Too, right?
And okay, you have Red Pheasant gaining chieftainship because he has this number of families following him. But where did those families come from? Were they part of, some other band that,
Mm-hmm.
and how did that come about?
Mm.
And one of the things that I've been noticing, I talk a lot about the great migrations of the past and all of the things that were involved in it. And I think some of my researchers, they don't really understand. And I say, well, look today, in the last 100 years, look at documentaries about Africa, those cows, those herds of buffalo over there, and how they travel and the things they travel. It was similar here, I said, and different tribal groups and different hoofed animals and different predators and birds. And we're all part of the equation here. But now, we've broken down everything so that each individual can have a name on a piece of land, or
Right.
if they have the means,
Right. I just think there's so much amazing history that has gone on in this area that we take for granted.
And for me, when I think about, Indigenous history, I see this place as being the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We were the ones that they couldn't reach, couldn't touch, even when they reached us, Yeah. We were prepared. It will be difficult, they said, and it was.
And we have a group in Lloydminster called the Heart of Treaty 6. And part of that is physically, we are the center on a map. We are the center here.
Yeah. And for me, the place I live, Spirit Drumming Hill and Sliding Hill, for me, that's the spiritual heart of Treaty 6. That's what the people were told to make sure the reserve encompassed these sacred doorways. Yeah. If we were going to be saving some land for ourselves, it had to include these two sacred places.
Yeah. Wow.
And my grandfather talked about when they were coming to survey the land, the government people told the chief that they could have enough land as a man could walk the boundary of in a whole day. And so there were two young men who set out during the day and traveled from one point on the land to another, and then turned and to a certain point and turned again. And towards evening, they arrived at their starting place, and that's how the reserve was chosen.
Wow.
Yeah. My grandfather used to name those two young men who made that. He said they were good walkers, fast walkers.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. I hope they picked somebody who walked fast.
Yeah, or ran. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. But even the foresight to protect those sacred sites.
That was spiritually guided.
Yeah.
And that's the part of the equation that many people don't understand, is that there was spiritual involvement in this, It was not a matter of somebody just realizing something all of a sudden and acting upon it,
Yeah.
Yeah. It was often at the guidance of the spirits, the direction of the spirits, that things happened.
So even as powerful as the government and the Indian agents and all of the RCMP and all of those historical forces, there was still enough, I guess, room for the spiritual piece to wield some power or some changing the destiny, a bit in all of that.
I mean, the government can issue all the decrees at once, and it may be significant to them, but what does it matter to the rest of creation, yeah, who also have a set of laws to follow.
Well, and that's where we hear people say, so-called Canada or so-called Saskatchewan, so-called Alberta, the place we call Alberta. Well, those borders are irrelevant in some circles.
And I mean, they're extremely relevant in this time and place, in this day and age, but in another context, another timeline. I mean, the focus was on the sovereignty of the entities, the spiritual entities of animals and people and plants, where that can't be fenced in. You know, we all need to have the freedom to go to whatever place on the land has what we need.
Right.
And as long as we know where that is, we can go in search of it. And if it's just part of a basic human need, there should be no restricted access.
Yeah.
And nobody should be saying you have to have a permit to go over there, so the government can make some money off you.
Right. Yeah. It feels like it was no accident, hey? This is where these researchers landed. Yeah.
Yeah. When I think about it, I think, that it's all happening in the way it was meant to. And that's, the thing about second guessing and doubts. And I think I've been talking with this about this with your daughter too, is, don't immediately dismiss your first. If you second guess it, fine, but go back to it and look at it, for what it is,
Right.
not discount it because of some preconceived notion you have about lack of worthiness or, stuff like that.
But I mean, we do that with kids, right? And, are you sure? Be careful. Well, no, your imaginary friend is just imaginary. And, we tell them all the things that aren't possible until they start to believe it. And
Yeah. And then they are limited in their ability, their courage, their imagination, their expression, because they've had so many critically important things sifted out of their consciousness as not being conducive to being a good employee and able to follow orders.
yeah.
We'll just leave that out of there.
Well, and then you add to that a society that's attached to devices and time indoors and comforts, and we're not out running through the trees and smelling things and digging in the dirt and rocks and leaves. All those things we miss out on. Well, I'm kind of intrigued by this whole, the researchers ending up here. I mean, I've never really thought about that.
Which researchers?
Well, even like how Bloomfield ended up at Sweetgrass. Like, it's even if the Indian agents and the government were involved in some of these connections,
and a lot of them started out in the south, along the Coppell River bands, Coppell Valley bands.
Yeah.
But what they were looking for was not there. And they were guided to, you want medicine men? You want to learn about medicine men? Talk to medicine men? Sweetgrass. That's where you go. Yeah. Talk to Old Bear. He was one of the most respected and feared shaman in the area.
Bear.
Yeah, Musqua. And Mandelbaum went to see him. And asked him questions about spirits. And old Bear sat and thought for a time, and then he told Mandelbaum, I don't feel free enough to tell you the information to the questions that you're asking for, because I'm afraid to make mistakes. And if I make mistakes, the spirits will make me pay if I misinform you. But I'll tell you, these questions you're asking, what you want to know about, see old Fine. That man is not afraid of anything, spiritual or otherwise, you know. And for me, that says that Fine was on good terms with the spirits. And didn't have to fear them.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
But to me, that says he had faith.
Yeah. And faith begets understanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the pictures, Fine was a fairly small man, wasn't he? I mean, in the pictures, he looks...
Actually, he was 6'6".
What?
Yeah. He was a tall, skinny guy.
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
See, and I pictured him as...
And actually, sometime come and stay with me for a few days, and we'll go through those old photographs. I'll show you photographs of Fine standing beside other old men where he just towers over them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. We look forward to continuing these conversations. Special thanks to Mr. Fine for sharing his wisdom and teachings. Much appreciation to the Lloydminster Public School Division Prairie Thunder Boys Drum Group for helping us to start and end each episode in a good way. We also want to acknowledge our friends and family and all those who have helped us along the way, including Startup Lloydminster for letting us use their space, Lakeline College for the equipment, and TELUS STORYHIVE for their support.